On the golden sands of the California coast, a story of courage and redemption is about to unfold. A single mother on the edge of despair, counting her last pennies to buy medicine for her asthmatic son, finds one last hope: a job as a nanny in the stunning glass and concrete mansion of a powerful Japanese businessman. What Sarah doesn't imagine is that behind the immense windows overlooking the sea, there hides much more than luxury and privilege. Among silent corridors and rooms darkened by perpetually closed curtains lives a girl with sad eyes and a literally broken heart. What began as a simple job opportunity soon reveals a devastating secret, a family tragedy wrapped in guilt, pain, and a terrible dilemma that could cost an innocent child's life. Now, Sarah finds herself on an impossible mission. While fighting to give her son the future he deserves, she must unravel the mystery of a shattered family before it's too late. But as the barriers between employee and employer begin to crumble, her own heart is also in danger. In a paradise setting where waves break tirelessly against the shore, the real storm happens inside a house where time seems to have stopped. Prepare yourself for an exciting journey that will make your heart race, your eyes fill with tears, and your soul believe again in the transformative power of love, even in the darkest moments. This is a story of bonds that transcend blood, scars that transform into strength, and broken people who, together, find their way back to life. Hearts by the Shore, a story that will move you and leave you speechless. Subscribe to the channel and tell us which city you're watching this unforgettable journey from. The clock in the plaza of the small town of Monterey marked 4 p.m. when Sarah Collins quickened her pace, avoiding the puddles formed by the light rain falling on the California coast. Her worn-out shoes barely resisted the moisture, but that was the least of her problems. In her tattered bag, she carried the letter of recommendation that could change her life. An opportunity as a nanny in the mansion of a Japanese businessman in the Green Coast compound, one of the most exclusive places along the shoreline. At 32, Sarah carried in her gaze the depth of someone who had known suffering too early. The only child of a couple of teachers, her childhood in Fisherman's Village had been a fairy tale interrupted at age 8, when an accident on the Pacific Coast Highway took her parents in a single, devastating instant. The memory still visited her in nightmares, the twisted metal, the muffled screams, and the oppressive silence that came afterward. The municipal shelter in Santa Cruz was her home for 10 years. Between grey walls and strict rules, Sarah learned that crying didn't feed anyone. She became self-taught, seeking in books donated to the shelter library the embrace she didn't receive from the adults around her. She dreamed of university, but life had traced another path for her. "Mum, we're going to be late for my practice." The voice of Eric, her 9-year-old son, brought her back to the present as they hurried along the beach promenade. Eric was her masterpiece, the product of a naive love with Michael, a medical student who had promised her the world when they shared a tiny apartment near Pebble Beach. The promises dissolved like the morning mist of Monterey when she announced her pregnancy. Michael simply disappeared, leaving only a note and $200 on the kitchen table. "I'm not ready for this," the note said. Since then, Sarah had been both mother and father, provider and comforter. "Coach Mark said I could join the main team if I keep training hard," Eric commented as he jumped over puddles with the peculiar energy of boys his age. "And you will, my love. You're the most persistent boy I know," Sarah smiled, adjusting the cap on her son's head. The coastal wind never forgave the unprepared. Eric's soccer practice at the municipal club was a luxury Sarah could barely afford, the result of a scholarship obtained thanks to the boy's natural talent. As she watched him run across the field, she thought about the interview scheduled for the next day. The salary offered by Mr. Nakamura was 3 times higher than her current one as a waitress at the beach cafe. Enough money to pay the overdue bills, buy Eric's asthma medicine, and perhaps finally manage to move out of the tiny apartment they shared in Seaside. upon arriving home after. In practice, reality greeted her with a new collection letter slipped under the door. Sarah quickly hid it, prepared hot chocolate for Eric, and sat down to help him with his math homework. The numbers danced before her eyes as her mind calculated how much longer she could survive with the little money she had left. "Will we make it, Mom?" Eric suddenly asked, his brown eyes fixed on hers. "Make what, son?" "Be okay. Mrs. Wilson from 302 said she heard you crying last night." Sarah felt her heart tighten. She believed her silent tears, she'd under the shower so the noise of the water would camouflage them, were her best-kept secret. "We always end up okay, don't we?" She caressed her son's face. "And tomorrow could be the beginning of something even better." While Eric slept, she prepared her only formal outfit for the interview, a navy blue ensemble bought on sale at the shopping center. The tag said size 8, but Sarah had lost so much weight in recent weeks that she needed to adjust the skirt with a few strategic pins. Next to the bed, she organized her documents, her work history with experiences as a clerk, waitress, and cleaner, her high school diploma earned through night classes, and the letter of recommendation from her former employer, a retired teacher from Carmel, for whom she had worked as a housekeeper. Lying on the narrow bed she shared with Eric, she observed the peeling ceiling as the rain intensified outside, transforming into a symphony against the roof tiles. The apartment was small, but it was close to the plaza where Eric loved to play on weekends. If she got the job at the Nakamura mansion, they might need to move. How would she explain this to her son? Sarah closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "Please," she whispered into the darkness, not quite sure to whom she was directing her plea. On the other side of town, in the imposing Green Coast compound, a middle-aged man contemplated the same rain through a panoramic window. Ken Nakamura observed the lights of Monterey twinkling in the rainy night, holding a glass of sake he hadn't touched. In the room next door, his 10-year-old daughter Lily slept, or pretended to sleep, clutching a worn teddy bear, the last gift from her deceased mother. The taxi slowly climbed the steep street of the Green Coast compound, one of the most exclusive areas on the Northern California coast. Sarah looked out the window, observing the mansions that seemed to compete with each other in opulence, each one hidden behind high walls and sophisticated security systems. The contrast with her apartment in Seaside couldn't be more evident. "It's here, ma'am," announced the driver, stopping in front of an imposing wrought-iron gate. Sarah paid the fare, stretching every penny of her emergency reserve, and got out of the car, feeling her heart accelerate as she approached the intercom. A camera silently turned in her direction before she could announce herself. The gate began to open, with an electronic hum. The path to the main house was lined with imperial palms and shrubs that seemed to have been measured with a ruler to maintain perfect symmetry. Not a leaf out of place, not a flower misaligned. The mathematical beauty of the garden conveyed coldness rather than warmth. The mansion gradually revealed itself, a contemporary construction of straight lines, glass, and concrete, so different from the traditional vacation homes in the region with their sloped roofs designed to withstand tropical rains. It seemed like a piece of Tokyo transported to the middle of the California coast, imposing, modern, and strangely displaced from the surrounding landscape. A middle-aged woman waited at the door, wearing an impeccably pressed uniform. Her face had Asian features, but her eyes already carried the warmth characteristic of someone who had lived in America for a long time. "I'm Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper," she introduced herself with a slight accent. "Please, follow me. Mr. Nakamura is waiting for you in his office." Sarah followed her, trying not to show her amazement at the interior of the mansion. The marble floor reflected the natural light that entered through the large windows, but despite the abundance of illumination, there was a heavy atmosphere in the air. The walls, although filled with expensive artwork, seemed devoid of soul. There were no family photographs, children's drawings, or any indication that a child lived there. Mrs. Chen led Sarah through a long corridor to a dark wooden door. She knocked softly 3 times before announcing something in Japanese that Sarah didn't understand. A terse "enter" was the response. Mr. Nakamura's office was exactly as Sarah had imagined, minimalist, organized, and intimidating. Behind a modern design desk sat Ken Nakamura, a man of approximately 45 years, dressed in an impeccable suit. His face, despite his relative youth, carried deep lines of concern around his eyes. What surprised Sarah most were his striking blue eyes. Unusual for someone of Japanese descent, they were the color of the deep ocean, intense and penetrating. "Miss Collins," he greeted without standing up. The chair in front of him indicated with a subtle gesture. "Punctuality is a quality I appreciate." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Nakamura," Sarah responded, sitting with the most upright posture she could maintain. The interview was methodical. Ken asked direct and precise questions, more interested in facts than elaborations. When Sarah mentioned Eric, she saw a shadow pass over the businessman's face. "I have a 9-year-old son," she explained. "If I'm hired, I'll need time off to be with him on weekends." "Your agency didn't mention a son," Ken commented, furrowing his brow. "I don't use an agency, sir. I came by recommendation from Professor Clara Peters, for whom I worked for 3 years. Ken consulted a folder in front of him. "Yes, the retired literature professor. She speaks very highly of you." Paused, as if considering something. "My daughter Lily is 10 years old. She doesn't do well with new people." Sarah noticed the hesitation in his voice. There was more there, something unsaid. "May I ask about Lily's mother?" Sarah risked, feeling she needed to understand the family dynamics. Ken's face hardened instantly. "My wife passed away 2 years ago. It's not something we discuss in this house." He stood up abruptly. "I'll introduce you to my daughter. If Lily accepts you, the job is yours." Mrs. Chen reappeared, as if she had been summoned, guiding them through another long corridor to a wing that seemed more residential. Sarah noticed that as they approached the girls' room, the curtains became heavier and closed, blocking the natural light. The house grew progressively darker and colder. Ken knocked softly on the door, decorated with a small cherry blossom sticker, the only indication that a child lived there. "Lily, may I come in?" he asked, in a tone that surprised Sarah, with its softness contrasting with his rigid posture moments before. There was no response, but he opened the door anyway. The room was spacious and decorated in pastel tones, with a bookshelf full of books and toys that seemed never to have been touched. Near the window, sitting in a rocking chair, was a girl small for her age, hugging a worn teddy bear. Her long black hair framed a pale face and eyes that seemed much larger due to her evident thinness. Like her father, Lily had striking blue eyes, though hers were lighter, more like the sky on a clear day, making her Asian features even more beautiful and unique. "Lily, this is Miss Sarah. She's come to be your new caregiver," Ken announced in an artificially cheerful tone. The girl didn't look up. Her fingers tightened on the bear. Sarah approached slowly and knelt to be at the child's eye level. "Hello, Lily. It's nice to meet you." For a brief moment, the girl's eyes met Sarah's, dark, deep, and so full of sadness that Sarah felt a lump in her throat. But soon the eye contact was broken, and Lily went back to looking out the window, as if the outside world contained something infinitely more interesting. "She doesn't talk much," Ken explained, the tension evident in his voice. "Not since—" He stopped, unable to complete the sentence. Sarah observed the interaction between father and daughter, or rather, the lack of it. It was as if an invisible wall separated them, both unable to reach the other side. At that moment, she understood that there was more at stake here than simply a well-paid job. There were 2 deeply wounded souls living under the same roof. but separated by an abyss of unprocessed pain. "Lily, what a lovely teddy bear you have," Sarah tried again. "Does he have a name?" The girl hesitated, her fingers caressing the worn fur of the toy. For a moment, Sarah thought she wouldn't get a response, but then an almost inaudible whisper escaped the child's lips. "Kuma." Ken seemed as surprised as Sarah. It was evident he hadn't expected any response from his daughter. "Kuma is a very nice name," Sarah smiled gently. "My son also has a special stuffed animal, you know. It's a little lion named Simba." Lily's eyes rose briefly, a spark of curiosity quickly suppressed. After a few minutes of attempted interaction, Ken signaled it was time to leave. In the hallway, away from his daughter's ears, he sighed deeply. "She spoke to you. That's unusual." He seemed to be processing the fact. "The job is yours, Miss Collins. Mrs. Chen will show you your quarters and explain your responsibilities. You may bring your son on your days off, if he's discreet." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her body. The job meant financial stability, a secure roof, food on the table. But as she looked at the closed door of Lily's room, she realized she had accepted much more than just a job. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel and drop a comment letting us know which city you're watching from. Your support helps us create more content like this. That night, after returning to her apartment to get Eric and their few possessions, Sarah watched her son sleeping in the guest room of the Nakamura mansion. The room was larger than their entire former apartment, and the bed where Eric rested seemed to swallow him in its vastness. Across the hall, she knew Lily was also lying down, probably hugging her Kuma bear, alone in her world of silence. 2 children under the same roof, separated by physical and emotional walls. What happened in this house? Sarah whispered to herself as the rain began to fall again over the coast, beating against the mansion's large windows by the sea. The first rays of sun could barely penetrate the typical coastal morning fog when Sarah was already up. After 3 days in the mansion, she was still surprised by the oppressive silence that hung over the house. Not even the common noises of a home, the clinking of cutlery, footsteps down the hall, the sound of running water seemed to exist there. It was as if everyone moved in a silent choreography, afraid of disturbing something or someone. Eric, on the other hand, seemed immune to that gloomy atmosphere. During his weekend visits, he brought life to the empty corridors, with his hurried steps and endless questions about the oriental art objects that decorated the mansion. "Mum, is this a real dragon?" he asked, pointing to a jade sculpture in the main corridor. "It's a representation, son. In Eastern culture, dragons symbolize strength and wisdom," Sarah explained, checking if there was anyone nearby. Mr. Nakamura had made it clear that Eric could come as long as he didn't disturb the tranquility of the house. "Does she never leave her room?" Eric suddenly asked, looking at Lily's closed door. The question caught Sarah by surprise. In 3 days, her interactions with Lily had been limited to bringing meals that returned almost untouched, trying to initiate conversations that received only silence in response, and observing the girl sitting eternally by the window, as if waiting for something or someone who would never arrive. "She's going through a difficult time," Sarah answered, carefully choosing her words. "Some people need more time to feel safe." Eric considered the explanation for a moment. "Like Andrew from my school, after his dad left?" Sarah smiled at her son's insight. "Something like that, yes." Later that day, while Eric played video games in the living room, a luxury never before experienced, Sarah brought lunch to Lily. As always, she found the girl in the same position, looking through the window at the palm trees in the garden, gently swaying, sitting in the chair with Kuma in her lap. "I brought your lunch, Lily," she announced softly, placing the tray on the desk. "Mrs. Chen prepared sushi today. It looks delicious." Lily didn't respond, but her eyes followed Sarah as she arranged the utensils. "My son Eric is here today," Sarah continued, determined to establish some kind of connection. "He's almost your age and would love to meet you." For an instant, Sarah thought she saw interest in the girl's eyes, but the moment passed quickly. "Mrs. Chen told me you used to like to paint." Sarah tried again, noticing the blank canvases stacked in a corner of the room. "I was never very good at it, but Eric draws very well. Maybe you could draw together someday." As she spoke, Sarah moved to open the curtains a bit more, allowing more natural light to enter the claustrophobic environment. It was then that she noticed something strange. Lily seemed short of breath, her face paler than normal. "Lily, are you feeling all right?" Sarah asked, quickly approaching the girl. The child didn't answer, but her small body was tense, and her hands squeezed Kuma with exceptional force. Sarah noticed a slight bluish tint to her lips. Alarmed, she knelt in front of her. "Sweetie, are you in pain? Can you show me?" "Where?" In a weak gesture, Lily brought her hand to her chest, her eyes now wide with pure fear. "I'll call your father," Sarah said, standing up. "No." Lily's voice was so frail that Sarah almost didn't hear it. "He gets sad." These simple words contained so many layers of meaning that Sarah felt her heart tighten. A 10-year-old child, concerned about not causing more sadness to her father, even while suffering. "Wait here. I'll get your medicine." On the bedside table, Sarah found a metal box containing several carefully organized and labeled medications. Reading the names, her stomach sank. They were powerful heart medications, the kind prescribed for serious conditions. She administered the medication according to the detailed instructions left by the nurse who visited Lily twice a week. Gradually, the girl's breathing normalized, and color returned to her face. "Better?" Sarah asked softly, sitting on the edge of the bed where she had settled Lily. The girl nodded slightly, still, hugging her bear. "Does this happen often?" Sarah asked, gently stroking the girl's black, silky hair. "Sometimes," Lily answered in a whisper. Mom knew what to do. It was the first time Lily had mentioned her mother, and Sarah recognized the opportunity to establish a deeper connection. "Your mother must have been very special," she commented gently. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "She used to sing to me when I got like this. Japanese lullabies." A single tear rolled down her pale cheek. "Daddy can't sing anymore." In that simple phrase was contained all the tragedy of the Nakamura family. A father unable to connect with his daughter because each interaction was a painful reminder of his lost wife. "I may not know Japanese songs," Sarah said softly, "but I know some beautiful American songs. Would you like to hear one?" Lily hesitated for a moment before nodding timidly. In a soft voice, Sarah began to sing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," the same song she used to comfort Eric when he was younger. As she sang, Sarah observed Lily's eyes grow heavy, the tension gradually leaving her small body, when the door to the room opened abruptly, interrupting the song. Ken Nakamura stood in the doorway, his face a mask of confusion and something more complex, perhaps guilt, perhaps fear. "What happened?" he asked, his gaze alternating between Sarah and his daughter. "Lily wasn't feeling well, but she's better now," Sarah explained, rising from the bed. "I gave her the medication, according to the instructions." Ken approached hesitantly, as if afraid to touch his own daughter. "Did she have another episode?" Sarah nodded. "Mr. Nakamura, may I ask what exactly is Lily's condition?" The businessman seemed to age 10 years before her, running a hand through his prematurely graying hair. He indicated they should leave the room. In the hallway, away from his now sleeping daughter's ears, Ken revealed the truth that Sarah already suspected. Lily has a congenital heart defect. She was diagnosed when she was 5 years old. His voice was laden with contained emotion. "The doctors in Tokyo recommended immediate surgery, but we decided to wait to seek other opinions. My wife Aiko believed she was too young for such invasive surgery." He paused, taking a deep breath. We moved to the United States because of my business, but also seeking specialists. Dr. Martinez at St. Joseph's Hospital is a world authority on pediatric heart conditions. And what does he recommend? Sarah asked, feeling she was treading on delicate ground. Surgery, Ken replied dryly. The same thing the doctors in Tokyo recommended 5 years ago. Sarah processed the information slowly. And you're still considering... Ken's eyes narrowed slightly. Miss Collins, I know your intentions are good, but there are factors you're unaware of. With all due respect, Mr. Nakamura, what I'm seeing is a girl who needs treatment, Sarah responded, surprised by her own boldness. The episodes are becoming more frequent, aren't they? Ken looked away, and Sarah had her answer. It was during a car trip to Big Sur, he said suddenly, his voice almost inaudible. Aiko and I were arguing about Lily's surgery. I was driving, distracted. I didn't see the sharp curve coming down the cliffs. His eyes filled with tears he refused to shed. When I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, Aiko was gone. Sarah felt the magnitude of the confession, the weight of pain and guilt that Ken carried. The reason for his reluctance to authorize the surgery, if something happened to Lily on the operating table, it would be like losing Aiko a second time. And this time, it would be entirely his decision, his responsibility. Lily said you were singing to her, Ken commented, abruptly changing the subject. Aiko used to do that. I hope I didn't overstep my boundaries, Sarah responded cautiously. No, he replied, a slight tremor in his voice. Thank you for caring for her in a way I can't. As Ken walked away down the dark corridor, Sarah remained there, absorbing what she had discovered. From the other side of the house, she heard Eric's laughter echoing through the living room, a sound so rare in that environment that it almost seemed sacrilegious. 2 children, 2 worlds, one overflowing with life and possibilities, the other slowly withering under the weight of unprocessed losses and unresolved guilt. At that moment, Sarah decided that somehow she would find a way to build a bridge between these worlds. The Big Sur State Park stretched green and majestic under the clear blue sky of a rare winter Sunday without rain. Families spread out along the open trails, enjoying the sunny day that warmed the northern California coast. Sarah watched Eric run after his colorful kite, his laughter carried by the maritime wind. What had happened that morning still seemed surreal. Lily had said during breakfast, her voice so low that Sarah almost thought she had imagined it. Can I go to the park with you? You want to go to the park with us? Sarah asked, trying to contain her surprise. The girl nodded, her eyes fixed on Eric, who was enthusiastically devouring his pancakes. Can I bring Kuma? She asked, referring to her inseparable teddy bear. Of course, Kuma is always welcome. Now, sitting on a park bench, Sarah observed Lily. The girl remained in the shade of a large tree, hugging her bear, watching Eric with a curiosity she tried to disguise. She was distant, enough to feel safe, but close enough not to miss anything. After 2 weeks in the Nakamura mansion, this was the first time Lily had agreed to leave the house. Ken had been so surprised that he almost cancelled an important video conference to accompany them, but at the last moment he backed off, as if fearing his presence might dissuade his daughter. Take good care of her, was all he said before locking himself in his office, but his eyes communicated much more. Hope, fear, gratitude. Eric, noticing Lily's gaze, approached her with the naturalness typical of children, immune to the complexities that come with age. Want to try? He offered, extending the kite reel. It's easy when the wind is good. Lily hesitated, pressing Kuma against her chest like a shield. Could you hold Kuma for me? She finally asked, surprising both Eric and Sarah. Sure, Eric responded seriously, receiving the bear with the same care he would dedicate to a precious object. I'll take good care of him. Sarah watched, moved, as a new friendship formed before her eyes. Eric, patient, teaching Lily to control the kite that danced against the blue sky of the coast. The communication between them transcended languages and cultural barriers. It was the universal language of children, made of simple gestures, brief instructions, and shared laughter. At one point, when the kite took an unexpected dive, Sarah heard something that warmed her heart. Lily's crystalline laughter, a sound so pure and unexpected that some people around stopped to observe, as if witnessing a rare event in nature. On the way back home, in the car driven by the family's chauffeur, Lily slept with her head resting on Eric's shoulder, who was also napping, both exhausted from the afternoon of play. Kumar was firmly secured between the two, like a silent guardian of this new friendship. When they arrived at the mansion, Ken Nakamura was waiting for them in the entrance hall, something he had never done before. His eyes widened slightly at seeing his daughter asleep with her head resting on Eric. "She had fun," Sarah commented softly, as Eric, now awake, led a sleepy Lily inside. "She looks different," Ken observed, emotion barely contained in his voice. "Children need other children, Mr. Nakamura. Loneliness isn't natural for them." That night, after putting Eric to bed, Sarah was surprised by a call from Lily. Entering the girl's room, she found her sitting on the bed, leafing through a photo album that seemed to have been taken from a hiding place. "May I see?" Sarah asked gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. Lily pushed the album toward her. The photos showed scenes from a previous life. A younger Lily, with chubby cheeks in Tokyo parks. Ken smiling openly, almost unrecognizable in his relaxation, and a beautiful woman with long hair and a gentle smile who could only be Aiko, the deceased mother. "She was very beautiful," Sarah commented, studying the face of the woman who had left. "Such a deep void in that family." "She smelled like cherry blossoms," Lily said softly, "and she sang even when she was sad." Her small fingers caressed the image of her mother. "Daddy took all the pictures away after she left. Said it hurt too much to look." "And for you, does it hurt to look?" Sarah asked cautiously. Lily considered the question with a depth surprising for her age. "It hurts, but in a good way. Like when you rub a wound that's healing." The wisdom contained in that simple response left Sarah speechless. This child, in her silence and isolation, had developed an understanding of pain that many adults would never achieve. "Eric said his dad left," Lily commented, abruptly changing the subject. "Is that different from dying?" Sarah took a deep breath, seeking the right words. "They're different types of loss. When someone dies, like your mother, we know they loved us and wanted to stay but couldn't. When someone chooses to leave, like Eric's father, it hurts. More," Lily concluded with an unshakable certainty. "It hurts differently," Sarah gently corrected. "Each pain has its own flavor." Lily was silent for a moment, processing. "Eric doesn't have a daddy, and I don't have a mommy," she observed finally. "We're alike." The simplicity with which the girl identified the link between them, absence as a common point, touched Sarah deeply. "Yes, you are," she agreed softly. In the following weeks, a subtle transformation began to occur in the Nakamura mansion. The heavy curtains were gradually opened, allowing natural light to penetrate the previously gloomy environments. Meals, previously served in separate rooms, began to happen at the dining room table, albeit amid hesitant conversations. Eric spent more and more time at the mansion, bringing his school books and even some classmates to play soccer in the huge garden. Lily initially observed from a distance, but with Eric's constant encouragement, she began to participate, first timidly, then with growing confidence. Most surprising, however, was the change in Ken Nakamura. The rigid and distant businessman began to arrive earlier from work, occasionally trading his suit for casual clothes on weekends. One afternoon, Sarah found him sitting on the lawn next to Lily, teaching her to make origami, a scene so surreal that she almost didn't believe her eyes. It was during a particularly lively dinner, with Eric telling about a scientific experiment at school, that Lily had another episode. This time it was more severe. Her small body convulsed, and her lips took on an alarming bluish tint. Before Sarah could even reach the medications, the ambulance arrived in minutes, cutting through the silence of the luxury compound with its strident sirens. At St. Joseph's Hospital, Dr. Martinez, a middle-aged man with gentle eyes behind round glasses, examined Lily thoroughly before inviting Ken for a private conversation. While they waited in the aseptic corridor, Eric held Kuma firmly in his lap. "She's going to get better, isn't she, Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "She's strong," Sarah replied, hugging her son. "Like you." When Ken emerged from the doctor's office, his face was pale, but there was a determination in his eyes that Sarah had never seen before. "Dr. Martinez said we can no longer delay," he informed, his voice strangely calm. "The surgery needs to be done next week." "And you—" Sarah hesitated, uncertain how to formulate the question. "I authorized it," Ken confirmed, a slight tremor in his hands being the only evidence of his internal turmoil. Aiko would have done the same. That night, while Lily slept in the hospital room, sedated and connected to monitors that beeped at regular intervals, Ken did something unexpected. He invited Sarah and Eric to sit beside him in the small chapel of the hospital. "On the day of the accident," he began, his voice almost a whisper, "Aiko had finally convinced me about the surgery. We were returning from Pebble Beach, where we had gone to celebrate the decision, with lunch at the restaurant she loved so much." He paused, swallowing hard. "The irony is that we were going to schedule the surgery when the accident happened." Eric, sensing the gravity of the moment, remained exceptionally quiet, his eyes attentive to the adult who rarely showed any emotion. "For 2 years, I convinced myself that avoiding surgery was a way to protect Lily, but the truth," his voice failed, "the truth is that I was protecting myself. If something happened to her during surgery, I would have no one to blame but myself." "You were afraid," Sarah said softly, not as an accusation, but as a recognition of what it meant to be a parent, to carry the weight of decisions that affected another life. "I still am," Ken admitted, the vulnerability in his voice something completely new. "But Lily is Aiko's daughter, too. She has her mother's courage." His eyes met Sarah's. "And now she has you and Eric." The boy, hearing his name, straightened on the bench. "I'll teach her to play soccer when she gets better," he declared, with the unwavering conviction of children. "The coach said it's not good for the heart at first, but I know how to do some light exercises." Ken smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed his face. "She'll like that," he said, placing a hesitant hand on Eric's shoulder. "Thank you, young man." As she observed that interaction, Sarah felt that something fundamental had changed. The barriers that previously separated those lives, employer and employee, Japanese and American, rich and poor, seemed less significant in the face of what united them: the love for their children and the universal desire to protect them from pain. Outside, the coastal night stretched over the city, with the lights of the shore shining in the distance. In the silence of the hospital chapel, 4 lives intertwined in unlikely ways awaited the dawn and the challenges it would bring. If you're enjoying this heartwarming story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Your support means everything to us. "A story about a rabbit that couldn't jump?" Lily asked, adjusting herself in the hospital bed, the IV connected to her fragile arm. "Exactly," Eric confirmed, sitting on the edge of the bed with a drawing notebook in his lap. "But in the end, he discovers he can fly, which is much better than jumping." Sarah watched the interaction between the children while arranging the fresh flowers they had brought to brighten the sterile room. It was the eve of the surgery, and anxiety hung over everyone like a dense fog. But Eric, in his childlike wisdom, had decided that the best medicine was creating stories. "Can we make him blue?" Lily suggested, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks, as if the proximity of surgery had awakened in her an urgency to live more. Intensely. Blue is my favorite color. Blue is perfect, Eric agreed, already reaching for the colored pencil, and he can have a red hat, like those we saw at the farmer's market. The mention of the outing they had taken the previous week brought a smile to Lily's face. It had been her first trip to the famous Monterey farmer's market, a labyrinth of colors, aromas, and flavors that had awakened her dormant senses. She had timidly tried cheese cubes from the hands of smiling vendors, tasted still warm shrimp pastries, and observed, fascinated, the enormous sea bass and sardines in the fishmongers' tanks. "Miss Sarah," Lily called suddenly, "do you think my mum would be mad at me for taking so long to have the surgery?" The question caught Sarah by surprise. It was the first time Lily had spoken so openly about Eco. "No, sweetheart," Sarah responded softly, approaching the bed. "Your mum just wanted you to be well. I'm sure she's happy that you're being so brave now." Lily seemed to reflect on this. "Daddy said she's watching over me from a special place." "And she is," Sarah confirmed, sitting beside the girl. "The people we love never leave us completely." "Like Kuma," Eric added pragmatically, referring to the teddy bear resting next to Lily's pillow. "He has a little piece of your mum inside him." The simplicity with which Eric understood the significance of transitional objects surprised Sarah. Indeed, Lily had revealed that Kuma had been the last gift from her mother, given the day before the fatal accident. "Do you think I can take Kuma to surgery?" Lily asked, a slight tremor in her voice revealing the fear she was trying to hide. "I'll talk to Dr. Martinez," Sarah promised, making a mental note to insist on this with the medical team. "I'm sure we can find a way." The door to the room opened, and Ken entered carrying a small, meticulously wrapped box. In recent days, he had been constantly present, working remotely from the hospital to be near his daughter. The transformation in his behavior was remarkable. The rigid and distant man had been replaced by a present father, attentive to every need, every smile, every moment with Lily. "I brought something for you," he said to his daughter, handing her the package. Lily opened it carefully, revealing a small silver brooch in the shape of a cherry blossom. Her eyes widened in recognition. "It was Mom's," she whispered, caressing the delicate silverwork. "She wore it on our wedding day." Ken confirmed, sitting on the other side of the bed. She said cherry blossoms symbolize both the beauty and fragility of life, how we should appreciate each moment because nothing lasts forever. There was a new emotional openness in Ken that moved Sarah. It was as if the imminence of the surgery had broken the last barriers he had built around his heart after losing his wife. "She would want you to have it tomorrow," he continued, holding his daughter's hand, "to remember that no matter what happens, we are part of something bigger, something that continues even when we're no longer here." Lily carefully pinned the brooch to her hospital gown. "Now I have Mom and Kuma protecting me," she declared with newfound confidence. Ken looked at Sarah and Eric. "And these two," he added with a choked voice. "Our family is now bigger than it was before." The word family hung in the air, laden with meaning. It wasn't an offer of permanent employment or a formal declaration, but a simple statement of how these four people, united by unlikely circumstances, had found comfort and strength in each other. Later, when Eric finally fell asleep on the sofa bed in the hospital room and Lily fell into a restless sleep, Ken invited Sarah for a coffee at the nearby cafeteria. "I never imagined I would be here," he confessed, as he observed the dark liquid in his cup. "When Aiko died, I died too, in all the ways that mattered. The only reason I continued was for Lily, but even then, I failed her. I hid behind work, assistants, nannies who came and went." "You were grieving," Sarah offered gently. "I was hiding," Ken corrected, a new honesty in his voice. "Until you arrived, you, with your persistence, with your direct way of saying the things I didn't want to hear, with Eric and his contagious energy. Sometimes we need fresh eyes to see what's right in front of us, Sarah commented. When Aiko died, I was certain I would never feel anything but pain again, Ken continued, his eyes fixed on the hospital identification bracelet on his wrist. But yesterday, when I saw Eric teaching Lily to fold origami, I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. Sarah smiled, remembering the scene. Eric trying to follow the instructions from a YouTube video to make a tsuru, the bird symbolizing longevity in Japanese culture, as a good luck charm for Lily. Children have that power, she responded. They bring us back to the present, remind us of what really matters. Ken hesitated, as if the words he wanted to say were stuck in his throat. Sarah, he finally said, using her first name for the first time. Regardless of what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that you and Eric, you saved more than just Lily. You saved me too. The vulnerability in his confession left Sarah speechless. This man, who commanded a business empire with an iron hand, who negotiated with tycoons and politicians, was admitting he had been transformed by a beach cafe waitress and her 9-year-old son. I was supposed to be just the nanny, Sarah finally responded, trying to lighten the intensity of the moment. You were never just the nanny, Ken corrected with a small smile. From the first day, when Lily spoke to you, something she hadn't done with anyone in months, I knew there was something special about you. The intercom called, announcing that visiting hours were ending. Ken looked at his watch and sighed. Tomorrow will be a long day, he said, standing up. We should rest. As they walked back to the room in comfortable silence, Sarah reflected on how life could change in an instant. 3 months ago, she was desperate, counting coins to buy Eric's asthma medicine. Now, she was beside one of the most influential men on the California coast, not as an employee, but as what exactly? Friend, confidant, family, as he had suggested. In the room, they found Eric and Lily asleep in the same peculiar way. Head tilted to the side, one hand under the face, the other stretched out, as if reaching for something in their dreams. Ken noticed the similarity too, and smiled. They're not even related, but they look like siblings, he commented quietly. Blood ties are just one of many ways to form a family, Sarah responded, adjusting the blanket over her son. That night, as St. Joseph's Hospital silently continued its work of healing and comforting, 4 people united by fate slept under the same roof, each carrying their own hopes and fears for the day that would follow. Outside, the coast shone under a starry sky, indifferent to the small human dramas unfolding within its borders. But inside that hospital room, something extraordinary had blossomed. A connection that transcended social, cultural, and economic barriers. A family not by obligation or birth, but by choice, by love. The clock in the waiting room of the surgical center seemed to move in slow motion, each tick of the second hand echoing in the heavy silence, marking time in an almost painful way. It was 7:15 a.m. when Lily was taken to surgery, Kuma firmly secured against her chest until the last possible moment, when the nurse promised that the teddy bear would be waiting for her when she woke up. I'll be fine, Lily had said, her voice small but determined, her mother's cherry blossom brooch pinned to her hospital gown. Dr. Martinez, with over 30 years of experience in pediatric cardiac surgeries, had explained the procedure the night before with a perfect blend of honesty and compassion. Lily's condition, a ventricular septal defect combined with pulmonary stenosis, was complex but correctable. The surgery would last between 4 and 6 hours, depending on what they found, once they could directly visualize the heart. Now, in the waiting room of St. Joseph's Hospital, Ken paced back and forth like a caged animal, his impeccable suit contrasting with his face, disheveled from a poorly slept night and unshaven beard. Occasionally, he stopped in front of the large window that gave a panoramic view of the ocean. his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if seeking answers in the distant waves. Eric, determined to be helpful, had taken charge of organizing a small improvised altar in the corner of the waiting room, a careful arrangement of colorful origami he had learned to make in recent weeks, each symbolizing a wish for Lily's healing. At school, the teacher said that in Japan people make 1,000 tsurus to make a wish come true. He explained seriously to Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper who had arrived early, bringing homemade food and clean clothes for everyone. I didn't have time to make 1,000, but each of these counts as 10 because I made them with great care. Mrs. Chen, normally reserved and formal, smiled gently at the boy. That's very beautiful, Eric. In Japanese culture, we have a similar tradition. Sarah observed the scene while serving coffee to Ken, who accepted the cup with a mumbled thank you. The wait was already excruciating, and they were only in the first hour. You should eat something, Sarah suggested, offering a sandwich prepared by Mrs. Chen. I can't, Ken responded, his voice hoarse. Not until I know she's okay. Sarah nodded, understanding. Instead of insisting, she sat beside him, a silent gesture of solidarity that said more than any words of consolation. At 9:30, the hospital chaplain, an elderly man with white hair and a gentle smile, approached the group. I'm available if anyone wants to talk or pray, he offered without pressing. To Sarah's surprise, Ken accepted the invitation. The two men moved to a more private corner of the room, where they conversed in low voices for almost 20 minutes. When Ken returned, something in his face had changed. He wasn't less worried, but he seemed to have found a certain peace amid the storm. He made me realize something, he commented as he sat down again beside Sarah. I've been so focused on my fear of losing her that I haven't allowed her to live fully. Aiko would never have approved of that. Sarah covered his hand with hers, a gesture of comfort that would have been unthinkable a few months before. It's never too late to change. The morning dragged on with excruciating slowness. Eric, eventually overcome by fatigue, fell asleep with his head in Sarah's lap. Mrs. Chen left to get more coffee. The corridor occasionally came to life with the noise of stretchers being transported and the murmur of professional conversations, only to plunge back into silence. At 11:45, Dr. Martinez appeared in the corridor, still wearing surgical attire. Ken stood up immediately, his body tense like a violin string about to break. Mr. Nakamura, the doctor greeted, approaching. The surgery is progressing well, but we found some complications that weren't visible in the exams. Complications, Ken repeated, the word coming out like a strangled sigh. The ventricular septal defect is larger than we expected, and there's an additional malformation in the pulmonary valve, the doctor explained with professional calm. We're correcting everything, but this means the surgery will take longer than initially anticipated. But she'll be all right? Ken asked, the vulnerability in his voice completely exposing the terrified father behind the facade of the powerful businessman. She's a strong girl, Dr. Martinez responded, placing a reassuring hand on Ken's shoulder, and we have the best team taking care of her. I'll return with more information as soon as we finish. After the doctor's departure, Ken collapsed in the chair, running his hands over his face. I should have done this years ago, he murmured, the guilt evident in every word. Aiko was right from the beginning. You're doing it now, Sarah responded firmly. That's what matters. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of anxiety and exhaustion. Ken eventually fell asleep, overcome by emotional fatigue. Eric woke up and began methodically drawing in his notebook, sketches of what the world would be like when Lily got better, including a meticulously planned visit to the Monterey Bay Aquarium. At 3:20, Mrs. Chen returned with Mr. Thompson, the driver, who brought fruit baskets and flowers sent by employees of Ken's company. The news of Lily's surgery had spread, and expressions of support began to arrive from various directions. At 4:45, Dr. Martinez reappeared, this time accompanied by a younger doctor who introduced herself as Dr. Wilson, the pediatric cardiologist, who would follow Lily in post-operative care. "The surgery was successful," announced Dr. Martinez, a tired but satisfied smile on his face. "We managed to correct all the malformations. It was a long and delicate procedure, but Lily behaved like a true warrior." The relief that took over the room was almost palpable. Ken staggered slightly, as if the weight of the world had been suddenly lifted from his shoulders. Eric let out a cry of joy that echoed down the corridor, and even the always composed Mrs. Chen let a few tears escape. "When can we see her?" Ken asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "She's being taken to the pediatric ICU now," explained Dr. Wilson. "She'll remain sedated for a few hours to facilitate the initial recovery. We suggest you go home, rest a bit, and return in the morning." "I'm not going anywhere," Ken declared firmly. "I want to be here when she wakes up." Dr. Wilson nodded, understanding. "In that case, we'll allow brief visits. Later, one at a time. She'll be connected to various monitors and devices, which may seem frightening, but it's all part of the normal recovery protocol." When the doctors left, Ken turned to Sarah, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "She made it," he said simply, the words laden with emotion. "She made it. She made it," Sarah confirmed, allowing herself a moment of pure joy. "And now a new phase begins for all of us." Eric, who had listened attentively to the medical explanation, approached. Ken with a seriousness surprising for his age. "Mr. Nakamura, will Lily be able to run now, and ride a bike, and swim in the sea?" Ken looked at the boy, genuinely touched by his concern. "Yes, Eric. After she recovers completely, she'll be able to do all those things and much more." Eric smiled, satisfied. "Then I'll make a list of everything we want to do together for when she wakes up." As Eric dedicated himself to his new mission, Sarah observed Ken walking to the window again. The sun was beginning to set over the ocean, bathing the beach in golden and orange tones. The lights were already beginning to twinkle along the shore, creating a carpet of urban stars. "Aiko would be proud today," Ken said softly when he felt Sarah approach. "Not just of Lily, but of me too, I hope." "I'm sure she would," Sarah responded with conviction. "When Dr. Martinez said the surgery had been successful, I had a strange feeling," he continued, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. "It was as if I could feel Aiko smiling, as if a weight had been lifted not just from my shoulders, but from her spirit as well." Sarah didn't respond immediately, respecting the depth of the moment. Finally, she said, "Perhaps it was. Some connections transcend even death." Ken nodded slowly. "I met Aiko when we were university students in Tokyo. She studied literature, I business administration. We were so different. She full of dreams and ideals, I already planning every step of my career." A small smile touched his lips at the memory. "She taught me to see beauty in small things, in imperfections, in the unexpected. And after she was gone, I forgot all that. Until now," Sarah added softly. "Until you and Eric appeared," Ken agreed. "You reminded me of the capacity to find joy in simple moments, to connect people, to see beyond the scars." The intercom announced that one visitor at a time could see Lily briefly. Ken naturally went first. As he prepared to enter the ICU, Sarah realized something fundamental had changed that day, not just for Lily, whose heart had been physically repaired, but for all of them. "Sometimes," reflected Sarah, "the greatest miracles happen not in operating rooms, but in hospital corridors, in waiting rooms, in moments of shared vulnerability, when social masks fall and the essential truth is revealed, that we are all equally fragile and strong, equally capable of suffering and loving." Hours later, when it was finally her turn to visit Lily, Sarah found the girl still asleep, her small body connected to various devices that monitored every beat of her newly repaired heart. Kuma had been carefully positioned beside her, as promised, and the cherry blossom brooch gleamed softly under the soft lights of the ICU. "Hello, warrior," Sarah whispered, gently holding the girl's hand. "Rest now. When you wake up, a whole world will be waiting for you." In the next bed, a mother gently rocked a newly operated baby, humming a lullaby. The machines beeped in their constant rhythm, creating a strange symphony of persistent life. And in the chair by the door, a veteran nurse observed everything with attentive eyes and an open heart, a silent witness to the small and large miracles that happened daily in that space dedicated to healing. Outside, the coast continued its nocturnal rhythm, indifferent to the personal dramas unfolding within its borders. But inside that pediatric ICU at St. Joseph's Hospital, something precious had been preserved, not just a girl's heart, but the future of a family that had found its way back to life through love, courage, and human connection in its purest form. Summer tinged the California coast with more intense shades of blue. At Malibu Beach, the waves danced with the gentle breeze before landing on the golden sand, creating a hypnotic spectacle under the feet of the bathers. 3 months had passed since Lily's surgery, and the world seemed different for all of them. More vibrant, more full of possibilities. "Be careful not to overexert yourself," Sarah warned as she watched Lily run lightly ahead, following Eric along the path that serpentined between the palm trees. "I'm fine, Miss Sarah," Lily responded, turning to smile, her cheeks flushed in a way Sarah had never seen before the surgery. "Dr. Wilson said I can do normal activities now." "Normal, yes. Running as if you were escaping from a shark, no," Sarah retorted, but couldn't avoid a smile. Seeing Lily like this, vivacious, curious, full of energy, was a daily miracle that still hadn't lost its impact. The girl's recovery had surprised even the medical team. 2 weeks after surgery, she was already home. A month later, she returned to school, no longer for isolated home lessons, but to an international school in Newport Beach, where she quickly made friends and showed a keen intelligence that had remained dormant during her years of illness. "Look, Daddy," Lily called, pointing to a seagull that was diving near the waterline, like the one in the marine birds book you gave me. Ken Nakamura, walking beside Sarah, smiled at his daughter. "Excellent observation, scientist," he responded, using the affectionate nickname that had emerged when Lily developed a fascination for marine biology during her recovery. It wasn't just Lily who had changed. Ken was almost unrecognizable compared to the rigid and distant man Sarah had met 6 months before. He had reduced his work hours, delegated responsibilities he previously insisted on controlling personally, and began dedicating Friday afternoons exclusively to activities with his daughter. Today was one of those afternoons, although exceptionally Eric and Sarah were also present. In fact, in recent months, the separation between the Nakamura family and the Collins family had become increasingly nebulous. Eric often slept at the mansion during the week. The four dined together almost every night, and weekends were filled with outings around the coastal region. "Let's see the crabs in that natural pool," Eric suggested, pointing to the rock formations further ahead. As the children ran ahead, Ken and Sarah followed at a more tranquil pace, enjoying the sunny afternoon. "I received an interesting call today," Ken commented casually, "from the University of Santa Barbara. Apparently, Professor Clara mentioned your name for the scholarship program for adults who wish to resume their studies." Sarah almost tripped in surprise. "She did what?" "Said you were always an avid reader and have a natural talent for writing and literary analysis," Ken continued, a slight smile playing on his lips. "She mentioned that you had commented about your dream of studying literature when you worked for her." Sarah felt her face heat up. It was true. During the 3 years she worked as a housekeeper in the retired professor's house, they frequently discussed literature while Sarah cleaned the shelves filled with books. Clara had mentioned several times that Sarah had an academic mind, but she had never taken it seriously. And that was a long time ago, Sarah responded cautiously. Before Eric, before everything. And now? Do you still have that dream? Ken asked, his tone casual, but his eyes attentive. Sarah hesitated. In recent months, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. From a nanny hired to care for a sick child, she had become... what, exactly? She wasn't just an employee, that was clear, but she also wasn't family, not officially. She occupied an undefined, ambiguous space, albeit a comfortable one. I don't know if it would be practical, she finally responded. I have responsibilities. Eric is thriving, Ken observed, looking at the boy who was now showing something in the water to Lily. And as for your responsibilities, circumstances have changed, haven't they? It was true. Although Sarah technically was still Lily's caregiver, her functions had evolved significantly. Now she was more mentor than nanny, more family friend than employee. Her salary continued to be deposited monthly, but Ken had insisted on opening a savings account for Eric and paying for the private school where the boy now studied alongside Lily. I'm suggesting, Ken continued when Sarah remained silent, that perhaps it's time to consider your own dreams as well. The registration for the scholarship program closes in 2 weeks. Before Sarah could respond, Eric and Lily came running back, excited about their discovery of a starfish hidden among the rocks. The moment passed, but Ken's words remained with her, planting a seed of possibility that she hadn't considered in years. The afternoon at the beach extended lazily. They drank coconut water at Old Joe's stand, explored the rock formations with their tide pools full of marine life, and finally sat on the sand for a small picnic prepared by Mrs. Chen. Mom, can I show it now? Eric asked while nibbling on a sandwich, exchanging a complicit look with Ken and Lily. Show what? Sarah asked, intrigued by the exchange of glances between the three. Eric took a large envelope from his backpack and handed it to her with a theatrical flourish. It's a gift from all of us. Curious, Sarah opened the envelope and removed several papers. Examining the first document, her heart accelerated. It was the deed to an apartment in Santa Monica, not far from the school where Eric and Lily studied. I don't understand, she murmured, looking at Ken for explanations. It's time for you to have your own space, he responded calmly. A place that's really yours, not just rooms in the mansion. But I can't accept this, Sarah protested, her voice trembling. It's too much. It's not just a gift, Ken clarified. It's a thank you, a recognition of what you did for us. And there are conditions, he added with a slight smile. Conditions. It has 3 bedrooms, Eric intervened, barely containing his excitement. 1 for you, 1 for me, and 1 for when Lily sleeps over, and it has a small library, he added timidly, for when you study at the university. Sarah looked at the 3 faces before her. Eric, radiant with joy, Lily anxious but hopeful, and Ken with a cautious expression that barely disguised his own anxiety about her reaction. How long have you been planning this? She asked, still trying to process the magnitude of the gesture. Since Lily left the hospital, Eric confessed. I helped choose the building because it has a volleyball court on the ground floor. And I chose the colors for the library, Lily added proudly. Teal, like that poetry book you always read. Sarah felt the tears forming and didn't even try to contain them. They weren't just tears of gratitude, although that was present. It was the emotion of realizing that, for the first time since losing her parents, she had people who really cared about her dreams, who saw beyond her present circumstances to what she could become. I don't know what to say, she finally managed to articulate. Say you'll consider registering for the university, Lily suggested softly, and that you'll let us help make your dreams come true. just as you helped us realize ours." And as the children animatedly discussed the details of the new apartment, the proximity to the beach, the condominium pool, the corner bakery that made the best croissants in the region, Sarah felt a strange sensation settle in her chest. It wasn't discomfort exactly, it was more like belonging. Throughout her adult life, she had been the caregiver, of herself in the shelter, of Eric since his birth, of the elderly and children in the houses where she worked. Always the needs of others ahead of her own, always postponing her dreams in the name of immediate survival. And now suddenly there were people taking care of her, not out of obligation or contract, but because they genuinely wanted to see her prosper. "I'll think about it," she finally responded, wiping away the tears. "About the university, I mean, the apartment." She hesitated, still uncomfortable with the magnitude of the gift. "It's an investment in the future of all of us," Ken said simply, as if sensing her hesitation. "Eric and Lily need you in their lives, Sarah, and so do I, if I'm honest. But you need space to grow, to become all that you can be." At that moment, under the blue sky of the California coast, surrounded by people who had inexplicably become important to her, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future different from what she had always expected. A future where she wasn't just surviving, but living fully, studying literature as she had always dreamed, providing Eric with a childhood of stability and opportunities, remaining present in Lily's life, helping her flourish after years of isolation. And as for Ken, what did he represent in this imagined future? Friend? Employer? Something more complex that didn't yet have a name? That was a question for another day, Sarah decided. For now, it was enough to know that they had created something meaningful together, a space of healing, growth, and possibilities that benefited everyone. "Can we visit the apartment today?" Eric asked, interrupting her thoughts. Ken looked at Sarah, leaving the decision to her. "Yes," she responded, feeling a wave of joy at seeing her son's face light up. "Let's see our new home." As they gathered the remains of the picnic and prepared to leave, Sarah noticed Ken watching Lily and Eric running ahead along the beach path, the girl now easily keeping up with her friend. "I never imagined seeing her like this," he commented, the emotion evident in his voice. "So strong, so alive." "Children are surprisingly resilient," Sarah responded, "especially when they have love." "And adults?" Ken asked, his eyes meeting hers. "We're resilient too," Sarah smiled. She thought about her own journey. The orphaned girl who became a single mother, who faced poverty and prejudice, who never gave up dreaming of better days. She thought about Ken, the man shattered by guilt and grief, who found his way back to life through love for his daughter. "We are too," she confirmed with a soft smile, "perhaps even more so." As they left the beach, the golden summer afternoon poured over them like a silent blessing. Ahead, an uncertain but promising future. Around them, a coastline that had witnessed their transformation. And within them, hearts that, despite the scars, continued to beat with renewed strength, proving that even the deepest wounds can become sources of strength when there is courage to move forward and faith to believe in new beginnings. Snow in Lake Tahoe was a rare event, almost mystical, but that July, 1 year after Lily's surgery, delicate flakes fell softly on the mountain resort town, transforming Emerald Bay into a fairy tale setting. The lake was partially frozen, reflecting the grey sky like a broken mirror, and the trees supported white mantles on their bare branches. "I never thought I would see real snow," Eric exclaimed, his face red from the cold, as he tried to catch snowflakes with his tongue. At 10 years old, he still maintained the contagious enthusiasm that illuminated any environment. "We have snow in Japan," Lily commented, adjusting the colourful hat that protected her ears. "But this seems different, more magical." At 11 years old, Lily had transformed. The fragile and Silent Girl had given way to an articulate and curious preteen, with a healthy glow on her face and a quiet confidence in her movements. The quarterly cardiac checkups showed a strong and healthy heart, and the scar on her chest, which she affectionately called her mark of courage, had faded to a thin, clear line. "That's because it's rare here," Sarah explained, taking photos of the children against the snowy backdrop. "The last heavy snowfall in Lake Tahoe was more than 20 years ago." "Good. Timing for our celebration, then," Ken commented, approaching with a thermos. "I brought hot chocolate, a special recipe from Mrs. Chen." The children ran to him, eager for the hot drink, while Ken served the chocolate in small thermal mugs. His gaze met Sarah's over the heads of Eric and Lily. There was a silent question there, a carefully controlled anxiety. Today wasn't just a casual outing, it was a celebration, and possibly a new beginning. In recent weeks, a silent transformation had occurred between them. The relationship that had begun as strictly professional had evolved into a deep friendship, and, more recently, into something more complex and indefinable. It hadn't been planned or openly discussed. Instead, it developed naturally through shared dinners after the children went to bed, through long conversations about books and movies, through mutual support in moments of doubt and celebration. Sarah had completed her first semester at the University of California, Santa Barbara with exemplary grades, confirming what Clara had always known. She had the mind of an academic. The literature course opened an entirely new world, filling a void she hardly knew existed in her life. Ken, in turn, had completely reorganized his company, delegating responsibilities he previously considered impossible to entrust to others. Now, he worked primarily from home, in an office with an always-open door policy for the children. The apartment in Santa Monica, initially a source of discomfort for Sarah due to its grandeur, had become a true home. Eric flourished in the new environment, transforming his room into a small laboratory for scientific experiments, while the room designated for Lily became her refuge during the frequent sleepovers that the children insisted on alternating between the mansion and the apartment. "Can we make a snowman now?" Eric asked, interrupting Sarah's thoughts. His chocolate mustache provoked laughter from everyone. "The snow is still too fluffy," Ken explained, cleaning the boy's face with a napkin. "We need to wait for it to accumulate more. Then we can explore the lookout in the meantime," Lily suggested pragmatically. "I read that some birds have specific behaviors during snowfalls." Lily's passion for natural sciences had developed significantly in the past year, fueled by frequent visits to the Natural History Museum and excursions to state parks. Eric, initially more interested in sports, gradually developed a shared fascination, especially for astronomy, which led Ken to install a small telescope on the mansion's veranda. As the children ran ahead, following a path already partially covered with snow, Ken offered his arm to Sarah. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly, referring to what would come later. "A little," she admitted, accepting the support. The path was slippery, but both knew the gesture was more symbolic than practical. "And you?" "Terrified," he confessed with a smile that contradicted his words, but in a good way. They had planned carefully, consulting a child therapist about the best approach. The children weren't naive. Both Eric and Lily had made suggestive comments in recent weeks, clearly perceiving the change in dynamics between the adults. But one thing was to notice, another entirely different to make it official. "Do you think they'll receive it well?" Sarah asked, insecurity emerging despite all the positive evidence. Ken gently squeezed her arm. "Eric practically adopted me as a father figure months ago. And Lily asked if she could call me Mum last week," Sarah completed, remembering the moment that had brought tears to her eyes. "But still, these are big changes." "That I agree with," Ken nodded. "And we have our own fears to overcome." He didn't need to elaborate. Sarah understood perfectly. For her, there was the fear that she was somehow betraying the memory of her parents by forming a new family. For Ken, it was the ghost of Aiko, not an impediment, but a presence that demanded respect and careful integration into the new reality they were building. In recent months, they had extensively discussed how to honor the past while embracing the future. The solution wasn't to erase the losses, but to incorporate them into the broader narrative of their lives, keeping photographs, celebrating anniversaries, speaking openly about those who had departed. "Look, a blue jay," Lily called, pointing to a bird with brilliant blue plumage that seemed immune to the winter cold. The four observed the bird for a few moments, its resilient presence in the snowy landscape providing a moment of silent contemplation. After hours exploring the park, building a modest snowman, and having a fierce snowball fight, where Lily and Sarah spectacularly defeated the Ken and Eric duo, they decided it was time. Seated in a shelter near the lake, warmed by hot drinks and heavy coats, Ken nervously cleared his throat. "Eric, Lily," he began, exchanging a quick glance with Sarah. "We'd like to talk to you about something important." The children immediately became attentive, exchanging complicit looks that suggested they might already suspect the subject. "You know that in recent months, Miss Sarah and I have been spending a lot of time together," Ken continued, carefully choosing his words. "And we're not just talking about dinners and meetings about you," Sarah added gently. "You're dating," Eric stated simply, as if pointing out something. "Obvious, like the color of the sky. We already know. Even Mrs. Chen and Mr. Thompson know." Lily nodded emphatically. "They bet on when you tell us." Ken and Sarah exchanged surprised looks before bursting into laughter. All the carefully constructed anxiety crumbled in the face of the children's frank observation. "Well, yes," Ken confirmed, recovering. "We've been seeing each other romantically, but there's more." He took a small dark blue velvet box from his pocket. The children's eyes widened simultaneously. "Is that an engagement ring?" Lily asked, her voice a mix of excitement and amazement. Ken nodded, opening the box to reveal a delicate white gold ring with a small sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "I asked Sarah to marry me last night, and she accepted." "Does that mean we'll be an official family?" Eric asked, the hope evident in his voice. "We already are a family," Sarah responded gently. "Marriage just makes it official on paper." "And," Ken added, looking at Eric, "if you agree, I'd like to legally adopt you, so you're officially my son, just as Lily would officially be Sarah's daughter." The silence that followed was brief, but laden with emotion. Then, simultaneously, the children launched themselves into a collective hug that almost knocked the adults off the bench. "Yes, yes, yes," Eric shouted, while Lily simply cried with joy, hugging Sarah tightly. As the four remained intertwined in that embrace, under the soft snow that continued to fall, over Lake Tahoe, Sarah thought about all the twists and turns life could take, how suffering could eventually make way for joy, how strangers could become family, how broken hearts could heal and grow, containing more love than before. On the horizon, the sun began to break through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the white snow. A new day, a new beginning for four souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed. Unconditional acceptance, courage to face the future, and, above, all the love that transforms houses into homes and people into family.